It's the After Show with TelecomTV's Guy Daniels and Ray Maistre.
Yes, welcome to the After Show. It's day 2 of the Edgenomics Summit and we are live on TelecomTV. I'm Guy Daniels, Director of Content, and this is our live Q&A show. Indeed, it's the final program of this year's Edgenomics Summit. And we've already received a number of questions from you following our 3 topic-based panels, but we can still take more. So if you want to get in touch, please do so now using the Q&A form on the website that's just below the video player. There's also a poll question. It's nice and simple, so go ahead and cast your vote. We'll be looking at the results later in this show. As always, your co-host for the After Show is Ray Maistre, Editorial Director here at TelecomTV. Ray, doubts are kind of starting to creep in a bit about the rate of progress on Telco Edge. It can feel like we're repeating a lot of the justifications and are still being a little too hesitant on deployments.
Well, Guy, I think it's fair to say that some parts of the telco edge sector have been developing more quickly in recent times, especially in the private enterprise and industrial IoT market. But as ever, there are some things that just take a lot of time to sort out, and network operators are desperate to figure out how their edge services can become interoperable, federated, offer roaming capabilities. But as we know from the past, this can be tricky to figure out. So there's plenty of time and effort going into these kind of developments, but it can still seem like things are moving slowly when maybe they're actually moving a little bit faster.
Yeah, as is the way with telcos. Well, let's just hope they don't miss out on the opportunities. Right, on with the show. Let's now meet our guests who are eager to help with all your questions. And joining us live on the program today are Jose Antonio Aranda, who is Global Innovation Director at Cellnex, Ildiko Vancha, Senior Manager Community and Ecosystem for the Open Infrastructure Foundation, Beth Cohen, SDN Product Strategies at Verizon, Robert Curran, who is Consulting Analyst with Appledore Research, and Jason Shepherd, outgoing board chair of LF Edge and VP of Ecosystem at Zedida. Hello everyone, good to see you all. Lots of audience questions to get through, so let's crack on. Ray, do you have our first question?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Guy. And we're going to put this first question to Beth. So Beth, the first question today from our audience is, are there any success stories of telcos driving new edge business? So any examples you could give us, Beth, at all?
Sure. So several examples. I can speak from Verizon's perspective. So we've been leaders in this area for a while, and there's a number of fronts that we have launched products. One is, as you mentioned earlier, 5G. So we've been doing a lot of work with 5G in private 5G and private MEC. We have a number of customers that have been deployed and have been successful, and we also have launched a product called Application Edge, which allows customers to put their own applications onto universal CPEs. So think of them as very mini clouds at the edge, right at their locations. And that supports, not only 5G, fixed wireless is actually kind of a better use for this particular use case. But also wireline as well. So, there's a lot of use cases out there, and our customers are definitely very interested in deploying them.
Okay, great. And just as a follow-up, Beth, is it enabling new services and applications? Because I guess that's always the promise of Edge, that it's going to open up new opportunities. Is it a little bit early for that yet, or are we seeing actual, real, concrete examples of new services being developed?
We are definitely seeing I wouldn't say it's, ubiquitous yet, but we're definitely seeing new services being developed. We did one with a shipyard that, they're deploying it for it's a private 5G deployment, and they're using it to keep track of the logistics. So, obviously they had some software that they wrote specifically for tracking all the units as they flow in and out. You can imagine shipyards are very busy places, very complicated places to keep track of things. We don't want containers to disappear, and their software allows them to keep track of that stuff.
Okay, excellent. So there are real world concrete examples out there, and it's still very early, but starting to see these things come from the slides and the presentations and into the real world in real services. So great to hear. Okay, so at this point, I think, Guy, we can hand over to you for our next audience question.
Okay, thanks, Ray. Robert, let me put this one to you first. And the question we've got is, what impact will the Edge have on mobile value-added services? Will Edge give that market a new lease of life, perhaps? And are there any obvious examples here?
Yeah, it's a good question, Guy. I think there's if you're talking value-added services, very often you're talking about a consumer context, and the question is, what kind of consumer experience can be improved by the combination of, a large amount of digital processing, control of latency, AI in any given context. And I think there's a wide range of potential here. Obviously, people are very familiar with the sort of event stadium-based, more immersive experiences kind of idea. There's a clear kind of upsell opportunity there. But also you look at things like, retail, adding virtual reality into a retail context and so on. I think there's just examples. I was at a hotel in London recently where my key card was managed via an app on my phone and via Bluetooth. Bluetooth is not perhaps the most ideal way to do that, but as an example of what other kind of things could be, using Edge and using 5G, I think security applications are key as well. I think one other area that I don't feel gets enough attention is the whole kind of safety, range of safety applications. So if you think about, you can imagine a black box on a vehicle or a motorbike, that in the event of a collision, uploads the last 30 minutes of video or 30 seconds of video, to the cloud, to perform analysis and make other, sort of notifications to people. I think there are a lot of potential applications that could be provided as value added. And I think security and safety are definitely things that people will pay a little bit extra for, according to their context. So yeah, I think there's a lot of potential here for additional services that really leverage that all those different flavors of Edge capability.
Thank you, Robert. Some great examples there, and also the focus on customer experience as well and user experience. Beth, you'd like to come in on this particular question?
Yes. So, you mentioned stadium experiences, of course, and there's a lot of push in the gaming industry as well. Verizon just partnered with a gaming company to produce more gaming experiences. But I think there's also some interesting use cases around the healthcare industry with telemedicine and, related to, emergency services and being able to have, the ambulance or the EMTs have conversations or get data related to the patients. Let's say the patient's having a heart attack, and they can start the treatment on the way to the hospital. So and that's already starting to happen. So I think there's a lot of pretty exciting use cases beyond the sort of the fun stuff. content delivery.
Yeah, so it's good news for value-added services then from the edge. Jason, let's get some thoughts and opinions from you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that part of the thing right now is we're in a chicken egg situation where the apps take advantage of edge services aren't all there yet. But once the infrastructure is there, then the apps will catch up. So in addition to the examples that were mentioned, cloud-based gaming is a big trend and driving that down to the edge and lowering the latency for the better experience for the user. Augmented reality applications, virtual reality, things that would benefit from those real-time services. I think where it gets really interesting, especially at the telco edge, is when you start looking at intercommunications between vehicles and public infrastructure and the vehicles themselves, to each other. So the cellular to vehicle trend, and not that you're going to be driving your car, from the cloud or from even the edge services, but this notion of syncing the traffic conditions and vehicles and preventing accidents and delivering new types of infotainment into vehicles. Those are all great examples of where we're going to see edge infrastructure take off over time. But you gotta have the infrastructure before the applications can really be developed, and then interoperability is a big part of it too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks very much, Jason. Great examples there. But I think we'll move on and get on to our next viewer question. So over to you, Ray.
Okay, thanks, Guy. And this question we're going to put to you, Jose, first. And quite a specific question here. Who is going to be making money from private 5G for enterprise users? Enterprises needing 5G will depend on the services or the applications that they specifically need. And if they go for this option, then the revenues will be for integrators designing the solution and implementing it. And some revenues might go to the equipment providers, but, says our viewer here, not so much for the carriers. So, Jose, where do you see the kind of the revenues as private 5G develops? Where do you see the business actually going? Does our viewer here have a point about where the funds might be going?
So the first entity who will be receiving revenues will be the mobile operator, in fact, because they are the ones who are approaching the industry and detecting those requirements. And one important thing is that when you install a 5G private network, you will have to install a network for several years. And sometimes the investment in the equipment is something that you will probably start investing at the beginning of the relationship with the industry. But those long-term, not only in terms of CAPEX, but mainly in terms of OPEX, will be probably something that it will go to the mobile operators and some of the partners. It's true that you need services. Some of the services are already delivered by the mobile operators. Some others rely on third parties, but the management of the infrastructure and the private network will be done by the mobile operators and their partners. That's why we do think that this is a very relevant business for the mobile operators. Let me put you an example of how we have worked with the mobile operators, for instance, for a chemical industry like BASF, where we have implemented together with the mobile operator a private network, a 5G private network. You see that you also are the chance to provide the first line of support to your customer, to the industry, despite there might be an issue with the service or with the integration. So we do see that there's a lot of business for the mobile operators and their partners.
Okay, excellent. Thanks, Jose. And obviously, just a great example of something that's really happening in the market there, where the mobile operators taking the lead. Jason, let's come to you now. Where do you see the revenue split happening? And I guess there's going to be so many different examples and different use cases and different revenue splits, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes down to the people that are going to make money are the ones that offer great services. I think private 5G is changing who is going to be able to make the revenue in this space, compared to more public networks, broadcast networks. Once you get into private 5G or any kind of private network on-prem, that opens it up to anybody. I don't think it's just going to be telcos that are delivering these types of services. We're seeing industrial players like a Siemens starting to offer these types of services. We've got kind of a mix of some of those players partnering with some of the telcos themselves. But I think a lot of opportunity is going to start popping up where people bypass the carriers. So it's important for the carriers to really make sure to offer great services and package everything together to capture that revenue.
Yeah, absolutely. Great point. And there's been a lot of stress already in the past year or so about understanding the needs of the customers and how important that will be to be able to win the business. Ildiko, let's come to you now. How do you see this working out with private 5G?
Yeah, I just wanted to add a quick thought. I agree with what Jose and Jason were saying, and I just wanted to mention, open source in here as well, like the Magma project, which is an open source mobile core framework. And I think it's just kind of interesting to also look into how open source projects like Magma will maybe help the current players of the market, or maybe disrupt a little and just see that who will be able to pick up the components of the project and maybe become a new player on the market. So when it comes to delivering services, that obviously has to be high quality. But when it comes to the private networks, projects like this one just kind of opens up the opportunities for those who didn't necessarily plan to play a role in this market, but now they can, because they can have and pick up the base package and spin up their own private network and provide services. So when it comes to the carriers, I think the next few years will really become very interesting in terms of both collaboration as well as competition.
Okay, yeah, great point. It's very democratizing, of course, and opens up opportunities for others. Beth, I see you wanted to come in there as well.
So I just wanted to add one comment, speaking as a person who represents the telecom world. We have that deep expertise of working, for delivering these distributed services, and don't discount that capability, because it's not easy to get. And also we also have the expertise in integration. On the other hand, we often can't get out of our own way. So I think if we keep focused, there's great opportunity for everybody to make money here. Not only the SIs and the hyperscalers, but also the telcos.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think with these things, it does tend to end up being a mix. And obviously, it's still a bit too early to see a very clear pattern. Jason, you wanted to come back there, I think, and maybe add something as well.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with all the points. I mean, I think that the technology shift that's happening across the board, 5G, I mean, obviously we're seeing a lot with, insert buzzword here, AI, IoT, edge in general. Companies these days, because of the democratization of the technologies themselves, driven through open source, projects like Magma, great example. You win by merit, not lock-in this market now. And those who innovate the fastest, are going to win. And I really don't think, I know the expertise from the telcos, really matters, but as those technologies increasingly become, the plumbing increasingly becomes commoditized, it's going to be people that offer great outcome-based services, as I mentioned before, and that's going to change. I mean, it used to be in the industry, whenever someone threatens your model, buy them up and kill them off. As some sort of startup, but there's so much innovation happening now because of the maker movement and the Kickstarters of the world. And as these technologies also become democratized, there's not enough money in the world to buy up everybody and kill them off. So either you have to change or you get disrupted. And rarely do the incumbents lead the charge in new markets. So it's not to say that they can. I'm just, I think it's really important to kind of pay attention to what's happening out there and with the pace of innovation and make sure to keep ahead of it.
Okay, excellent. Good points, Jason. And Jose, I could see you wanted to come in there as well.
Yes, in fact, when we think of the revenues that the mobile operators may have, we always have in mind the maintenance of the network. But it is true, and it was mentioned before, that innovation is another area that the mobile operators are investing in a lot of efforts, and also the telco industry. So, for instance, there are companies offering already private networks that are on the top of the priority list from the mobile operators to partner with or even to invest in. And there are examples like even infrastructure providers like us that we have invested in a company called EDZ.com that they had already 40 private networks across Europe. And acquiring that asset means that you're going to have revenues not only from your traditional business, but also from other sources. But additionally, the mobile operators are also investing in those applications, those services, and not only by buying specific startups, but also developing themselves the services. And that's another way that the mobile operators are likely to receive more money from the industry and get higher revenues.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, everybody can smell the money in this market, and you can't just talk about partnerships and collaboration these days. You actually have to do it as well, not just talk about it. Robert, I see you wanted to come in as well.
Yeah, I wanted to mention the S word in this conversation because it hadn't got so far already, which is spectrum. At the end of the day, private networks are going to have value and going to work in all kinds of contexts that are intimately tied with the different flavors of spectrum that are available, the licensing models that are applying in given regulatory environments and so on, and obviously the service providers are the people who are today in most cases closest to that and own it in many cases. But that knowledge, I think Beth is alluding to some of the expertise that the telcos have, that knowledge about what spectrum works best for what kinds of applications is quite important in terms of monetizing it. I think one of the things that Edge creates is the potential for more points on the value curve. So that combination of the ability to monetize the spectrum, but monetize it in more ways, and using all the other capabilities of Edge, creates a lot of upside price points, if you like, on what kind of services can be sold, because the kind of applications that you need to control or to manage devices that are delivering hot food from restaurants, which is what SK Telecom are doing, for example, is very different than something that's controlling agricultural dosage in fields or in a kind of healthcare environment. So I think spectrum is one of those things that isn't possible to get too far away from it to start with, partly because of who owns it, and the second thing is who controls it. So that's quite fundamental, I think, in the whole private 5G, private enterprise network space.
Okay, great. Yeah, good point, Robert. And we'll come back to Jason finally, I think, for the final comment on this question. Jason, back over to you.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. The whole notion of spectrum, is a big one. I think it's more of an issue probably even in the States than globally. So depending where you are, I think that the ability to get spectrum is different. Of course, I think in Europe it's it's a little bit easier. There's going to be new types of brokering services emerging, but it is a consideration for sure. There's also a lot of stuff that's going to be happening in kind of the Asia region. So global concerns or considerations are going to come into play with the spectrum question.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And there are, as we know, certain markets where spectrum has been set aside specifically for private networks, but it's not quite clear how much that's been taken up. Well, it gladdens my heart to know that the question about who's going to make money out of this has generated the most answers and the most hands up. So that's, I think that's a very good sign. So great question from our audience there. But Guy, at this point, I think we'll hand over to you for the next part of the program.
Yep, thanks, Ray. Some fantastic insights there. Well, it's time now to check in on our audience poll for this year's Edgenomics Summit. One question, 5 multiple choice answers, and I'm afraid, again, you can only pick one. And the question we are asking all this week is, are there really new revenue generating opportunities for telcos from the edge? Which fits in very nicely with that previous viewer question. And you can see the current real-time split of votes right here. And look at that, our audience thinks, yes, there are new revenue generating opportunities for telcos, but telcos must strike the right partnerships and commit to open architecture. So yes, but a cautious yes. And if you haven't yet voted, then please do so now. The more votes we get, the better, the more representative the final results. But don't delay, because we're going to be closing the polls on Monday morning. Right, back to our Q&A. But first, here's about 10 seconds of blatant self-publicity for our first in-person event in over 2 years.
Put those PowerPoint slides down and actually talk about what we need to do to move ourselves into the DSP arena.
Yeah, do come along if you can. It's going to be a great couple of days. You're going to really enjoy yourselves. Okay, we are about 25-30 minutes into this live program, but we still have time to answer a few more of your questions. So over to you, Ray, for our next one.
Okay, thanks, Guy. So Jason, we'll come to you first with this next viewer question. And the question is, what is the ultimate ambition of telcos for the edge? Is it just interconnect, or do they want more than that? And if so, what other investment is required, such as domain expertise, developer tools, ecosystem engagement? So we've probably touched on a little bit of this already, but let's find out your thoughts on this one.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, and even the early poll results show that kind of cautious yes, and have to have the right partnerships and focus on open technologies. I always say you have to democratize the South to monetize the North. South being kind of towards the devices and the whole interoperability. Like, open really matters. Imagine if the internet wasn't open, probably wouldn't have driven the massive economic change that it did. But it really comes down to, yes, the telcos want to monetize more than connectivity, because the money is in the outcomes long term. The network is increasingly being commoditized. I mean, it is commoditized, and I think, as we've been talking about already, private 5G is going to also change who has the ability to deliver services to customers. So it absolutely requires domain expertise. It requires the right partnerships. I think it's important to partner even with some of the smaller players out there, some innovative startups to get to accelerate even further this ability and kind of shake things up. I mean, you look at all the biggest changes that we've seen in market and how people do things are from startups like Airbnb and Ubers of the world and all that. I mean, it just completely disrupted industries. So you can't discount the ability for a small company to come in, and if you're not careful and looking around for those types of opportunities, you just get passed by.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we're already starting to see the impact of these kind of opportunities on the way that that service providers are behaving. Beth, you wanted to come in with some comments here.
I did. Speaking again as a service provider, I think it's super important that we develop that ecosystem that Jason mentions. And I think that the service providers can be the glue in that ecosystem if we play our cards right. Because again, we do have the expertise, we own the spectrum, we own the infrastructure, and we can create those ecosystems to support the developers. Obviously, we're very supportive of open architectures, I'll mention the open source, some of the open source projects, obviously the Open Infra, OpenStack project, all the telcos are using it, right? So, I think that it's important that the telcos invest in creating those ecosystems. Even though, to a certain extent, the developer community is a little bit of an alienation for us. I think it behooves us to become more familiar with the developer community and make a comfortable place for them to develop those new and exciting applications.
Yeah, absolutely. And we are definitely seeing efforts with open API initiatives and other efforts as well to move towards that. Ildiko, what do you think? What needs to be done to enhance the opportunities here for service providers?
What I've been seeing in the past, couple of years is kind of a transition happening when it comes to telco service providers. So I don't see that clear line anymore between telecom and enterprise. They are getting much closer together. So I really just wanted to echo what Beth was saying. In terms of embracing open source and also embracing more the developer ecosystem and really build that ecosystem that is kind of having players from both sides and removing sides really and just kind of be one ecosystem and having a much better understanding of what each and every player in it is doing. And also with more and more involvement in open source communities from the telecom operator space, I believe that when it comes to the needs in terms of skills, additional skills that they don't have yet, have some developers in-house, have a better understanding of each and every component that gets delivered into a telecom backbone infrastructure. I think it is crucial and key, and service providers have been putting in the effort into those infrastructure components are not black boxes anymore. There are multi-vendor solutions. Interoperability is everybody's responsibility and challenge at the same time. So I think that one of the key points here really is to be open-minded and really embrace all the opportunities, even if it's outside of the box, because the box is constantly changing.
Yeah, absolutely. The lines are definitely blurring. I mean, we're even seeing network operators essentially becoming vendors these days as well. So lots of things are changing. Jose, let's come to you now. What are the things that the service providers can be doing to take the greatest opportunities with the edge?
Yes, I cannot agree more with what it was mentioned before. I really see that the differentiating factor will be on the solutions or on the services that the mobile operator are able to deliver to their customers. Things like augmented reality and the use of, for instance, virtual reality glasses to access, for instance, things like tourism, I think are things that are now popping up and have a very promising future. It was mentioned also before, areas like mobility and gaming. The combination of both can be something very interesting. And I don't think that there is the ambition, or there should be the ambition of the mobile operators to just stop in the interconnection, because there might be a point where the edge computing will become as an infrastructure, something that a third party like a tower company could also provide. And we see demand from the mobile operators to have companies like us building edge data centers on their behalf. And little by little, we see that as the number of nodes will increase, mobile operators will be willing to share not only the data centers in terms of electricity or space, but also in terms of maybe servers And if we go a little bit more advanced in terms of containers or virtualization functions, and there might be a chance for entities like infrastructure providers to be in that space and offer containers as a service depending on the demand. Therefore, I really see that in the future, the mobile operators have a greater opportunity in providing value through services rather than the pure interconnection and the infrastructure.
Yeah, absolutely. Great point. And you only have to look at the amount of investment that's going into shared infrastructure these days to see that. I think everybody's coming to the same conclusion there. Robert, let's come to you next.
Yeah, I mean, the answer to the question is very simple. It's revenue. What are telcos? What's the ambition in Edge? It's all about making more money, and make more money by being more relevant to customers. And I think one of the interesting things about Edge is that it opens up so many different possibilities. What telcos are trying to find is where is the sweet spot for them. They're good at large scale, large infrastructure, common service for everybody. And what enterprises want is things that are specially customized for them, and that's not a business model that telecom is comfortable with. It doesn't scale down very well, but because of 5G and Edge, it creates a new space in the marketplace where there's a potential to find a sweet spot for an offering that is scalable, but specific enough to a whole group of customers. Now, we haven't found exactly what that is yet. So you're seeing a lot of experimentation going on, and hats off to the operators who have realized that they've got to invest in innovation, not just in making an innovation, but in how innovation happens at all. I know that Vodafone have an Innovation Edge program, for example. They are reaching out and trying to encourage the factory for new ideas. I think that's really, really important. But at the end of the day, it's about being relevant to what customers are, how they are changing in their businesses, and being deriving real revenue from helping them solve their problems. So I think that's that's the ambition here. This is not about architecture. At the end of the day, it's about money. How can we make money?
Yeah, absolutely. It's the business opportunities, which is why we don't call this the Edge Summit. We call it the Edgenomics Summit. That's the whole thinking behind it. And Jason, let's swing back to you for a final comment here.
Yeah, so I'll also stress we've been talking about open infrastructure and shared investment there, but the other thing too, it's at the application layer. I see a lot of telcos that are trying to develop their own application platforms. That too is a space where there's a lot of time and resources going in where that's going to also be democratized. Even some of the basics around AI models and all that. I mean, there's certain elements of analytics are going to be part of infrastructure over time. So it really does come back to that. Whoever puts together the best services, wins. We saw this trend over the past 5 years. I mean, the last thing the world needs is another IoT platform. That's for sure. There's way too many IoT platforms. We saw this trend in the industrial space where the industrial players who've historically locked customers in by creating proprietary protocols for their control systems, that's being democratized with new types of protocols that are open, like OPCOA and MQTT and the like. They all started to try to build their own platforms about 5 years ago, and what we're seeing, thinking I can lock people in with my industrial IoT platforms, but everyone's now migrating to, well, maybe I'll just use the shared infrastructure from the cloud scalers and then wrap my services and my domain knowledge around it. So the main thing I would just caution is don't reinvent the base. Focus on wrapping everything up around it.
Yeah, great point. And I think, particularly enterprise users are a lot more savvy these days about, what's going on behind the scenes and how they can be more flexible and agile and not get locked in. Okay, great. Thanks, everybody. Great comments, great answers to that question. Guy, over to you for our next question.
Yep, thank you, Ray. Looking at the time, we might be able to get a couple more in, or this could well be the last one. Ildiko, let me start with you for this viewer question, because the questioner asks, have the industry dynamics changed in relation to open source edge stacks in the past couple of years? Do telcos have multiple options when seeking productized, hardened commercially available versions?
So this is kind of two questions built into one. So let me start with the first half, which is the dynamics in the open source space. So in the past roughly 5 years, what I've been seeing is that there was kind of a big boom in terms of open source projects or partially open projects and consortiums in the edge computing space. Everybody was trying to spin up their efforts and trying to figure out what edge computing is, what kind of gaps there are on the multiple layers of the stack, hardware, software, infrastructure, orchestration, applications, and all that. And also really just trying to figure out where to make money. So that question got kind of a little bit in the way of these groups collaborating with each other. So right now, as the industry and the different segments are moving into more and more production deployments, we kind of reached the era of consolidation in the open source space as well. So, for instance, I literally just woke up this morning to an email from the Open Edge Computing Initiative that effort is kind of graduated. So they are seeing a lot of production deployments now. So their efforts have been shifted over from figuring things out and holding workshops into putting more effort and organizing people into their live edge lab and focusing on some more new innovative applications and proof of concepts and trials. So that's just one example in terms of consolidation. And there's also more and more collaborative efforts happening in the open source space, like Starting Axe. It's an open source edge platform. They are collaborating, for instance, with the ORAN software community, trying to figure out what an edge infrastructure looks like for ORAN and how to make that happen together. And that kind of drives over to the second half of the question in terms of what options telcos have when it comes to hardened services and projects. Over the past couple of years, there were both new projects being introduced into the market, as well as looking into how to use existing projects in the edge space for an end-to-end infrastructure. Like I can mention OpenStack, which is used at the edge. So it is one of the examples of a core-to-edge solution. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel. In fact, you can use existing, well-known, well-hardened solutions like OpenStack. There are obviously a lot of offerings like Red Hat. The Red Hats and Canonicals from more the enterprise side are stepping into the telecom space, for instance, and have been doing that through OpenStack, and that's not changing for the edge either. Or the Ericssons and the Nokias on the traditional telecom vendor side. But if you look at projects like Starting Axe, it is a project that has also distributions from, for instance, Wind River. They are working with Verizon, Vodafone, T-Systems to have their infrastructure delivered from core to edge, have 5G running on top of Starting Axe. So there are a lot of examples, and I selfishly only mentioned the Open Infra Foundation projects in the commercial offering space, but there are many, many more than just these two.
Thank you, Ildiko. So yes, there's plenty of options there, apparently, and thanks for that overview, and also for that breaking news you shared with us there. That's always good to have on a live show. Any more thoughts about the state of these open source stacks and their journey into commercial offerings, Beth?
Yeah. So, and again, I'll speak from a company that does in fact use these open source offerings, and yes, we rarely do it ourselves, although we do have some instances where it's supported internally. But we recognize the value of the open source pipeline, and we invest in it, and then we frequently work with third parties, such as Red Hat, to support our services. So I think that partnership is continuing to work. So I don't see that changing anytime soon, and I think that's going to grow.
Great, thanks very much, Beth. That is indeed going to be our last question. So if there's any more comments on that last question, now's your final chance. Otherwise, we'll leave it at Beth's comments there. Oh, Jason, do you want to come in on a final comment there?
Yeah, I'll say. I mean, obviously, Verizon does a great job leveraging the foundations and that are available out there. I think a lot of people. There are a lot of great choices, but a lot of people get confused by so many choices. So there's a big opportunity. I mean, this is, as she mentioned, you're working with like a Red Hat or Canonical or a SUSE or people that make a living packaging everything up. I mean, if you value your time, you don't just go to GitHub and you pull something out, and you want to have something that's supported. So there is a big opportunity too, I think, for new types of players to come in and help people navigate all the value in open source, and so then they can focus on the outcome-based solutions on top.
Great, thanks for that advice there, Jason. Right, we are out of time. Thank you so much to all of our guests who joined us for this live program today, and to our audience for sending in their questions. Boy, we got through a lot of comments and opinions today. And that is a wrap for the 3rd annual Edgenomics Summit, but Ray and I will return.
Oh yes, we'll be back before the Easter egg wrappers have been recycled for 2023. Keep both eyes out for our Telcos and Public Cloud Summit at the end of April.
Yes, so please join Ray and me for the next TelecomTV Summit. And if you can, come and join us in person at the DSP Leaders World Forum event in May. It'd be great to see as many of you as possible. For now, though, thank you for watching and goodbye.
The After Show was recorded in front of a live online audience.